I yield back and recognize the distinguished gentleman, our leader of the Democratic Caucus and our future speaker, the member from New York. The gentleman from New York's 8th District, Brooklyn proud, leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Good morning. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you all today on this incredibly important moment here in the great state of Florida. Let me thank my good friend and our distinguished colleague, the co-chair of the Steering and Policy Committee, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's doing an incredible job. I thank her for yielding, for her leadership, and for convening this incredibly important hearing. I also want to thank my other distinguished colleague, another co-chair of the Steering and Policy Committee, Congressman Dan Kildee from the great state of Michigan, as well as all of my incredible colleagues in Congress, Secretary Becerra, who we will hear from shortly, as well as these very important witnesses. Florida is now ground zero in the fight to protect a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And as House Democrats, we are here to make clear that we stand with you to protect reproductive freedom. Let me acknowledge our witnesses here today and thank them all for their tremendous advocacy and support for reproductive freedom during this incredibly fragile moment here in Florida and across the country. We are here today to all make clear our unwavering, unyielding, and unequivocal support for reproductive freedom, because reproductive freedom is under assault. Today's hearing is incredibly important, particularly given the Florida Supreme Court's decision, as Congresswoman Schultz outlined, that will now trigger in less than 30 days a 6-week abortion ban here in Florida. But the women of the state will have their voices heard in November with respect to an amendment that will make access to abortion a guaranteed right, and we stand with you in that effort. An extreme group of individuals in this state, led by the current governor, are prepared by almost any means to jam their radical right-wing ideology down the throats of the people of this state as part of an effort to try to impose a nationwide abortion ban. But we can stop them, we must stop them, and we will stop them together. Together we can stop them from criminalizing reproductive freedom. Together we can stop them from outlawing contraception. Together we can stop them from restricting IVF. Together, we can protect reproductive health care. We will continue to stand with you to make sure that a woman has the freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, work with you to protect abortion care access, and stand with you to defend the women of this great state. We will continue to stand up for reproductive freedom. We will stand up for reproductive freedom today. We will stand up for reproductive freedom tomorrow. Together, we will stand up for reproductive freedom forever. Thank you,
I'd like to call this meeting
and I
of the
yield back.
Steering and Policy Committee to order. I'm Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I am a member of Congress. I represent Florida's 25th Congressional District here in Broward County, the first all Broward County Congressional District in 40 years. Finally got our due here in Broward. I want to thank my colleagues, Leader Jeffries, Co-Chair Kildee of Michigan, Congresswoman Kelly of Illinois, Congresswoman Castor of Florida, and Congressman Soto, Moskowitz, who will be joining us momentarily, and Frost of Florida, for making the trip here to Broward County, Florida. I also want to thank the Broward County Commission for allowing us to hold this first field hearing in their commission chamber. Thank you to Mayor Nan Rich, my dear friend, former Senate Minority Leader, and her staff, and all the commissioners and dedicated staff here. They have been amazing and incredible to work with, and it was fortuitous that this was not a meeting day for them, and it gave us the opportunity to borrow their hearing room. This committee meets weekly when we are in session. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what the Steering and Policy Committee's role is, we meet weekly when we are in session in Washington, but it's vital that we also hear from stakeholders and constituents who can't necessarily appear in the Capitol to testify or meet with us. So we took it on the road today so that we could make sure that we were able to hear from people in communities across the country, starting in South Florida. And I'm incredibly proud that our first field hearing is here in South Florida and on a topic that is timely with the ongoing threat to reproductive freedom here in our state and across our country. Like any hearing of the Steering and Policy Committee, we'll start with opening statements from the leader and the co-chairs of the committee. And for that purpose, I recognize myself for the making of my opening statement. Nearly 2 years ago, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and eroded over 50 years of legal precedent that protected a woman's reproductive freedom. This ruling unleashed an avalanche of far-right anti-choice policies with one clear goal: to ban abortion outright. This flawed Dobbs ruling positioned extremist politicians and judges, fueled by their hard-right ideology, directly between women and their examination room and their health. It put judges and politicians in women's doctors' offices, at their pharmacy counters, and in their homes. It upended and invaded their right to privacy and their deeply personal space. Since that horrific decision, we've seen countless policies proposed and passed into law that interfere with our fundamental right to choose if and when to start a family. We see it with anti-abortion bans, some of them with only minimal or even no exceptions. We see it in proposals to bar medication abortions. It's showing up now with interference and confusion on access to in vitro fertilization and contraceptives. We also see it in anxiety among health professionals who fear for their ability to treat the patients in front of them. And it's causing real health threats right now, as we will hear, in all phases of emergency care for pregnancy complications. The list goes on, but I guarantee you the threats will not stop there. Just yesterday, the Florida Supreme Court bowed to extremist Republicans in Tallahassee and overturned precedent to allow the 15-week abortion ban here in Florida to stand. Because of their ruling, we are 29 days away from seeing a 6-week abortion ban take effect that the Republican-led legislature teed up to become law if their already draconian 15-week ban was allowed to stand. What this means for Florida women, in real terms, is that after May 1st, abortion care will become almost impossible to receive in Florida, with almost no exceptions. This will impact not only millions of women in the Sunshine State, but millions more across the South who faced familiar bans and look to Florida for a semblance of reproductive freedom. But there is hope. Floridians will have a chance to make their voices heard this November and send these extremist policies back to the 20th century, where they should have stayed. Today's, thank you. I'm assuming there would be more than one person applauding. That's what Broward County is all about right there. Today's field hearing is a critical step to help highlight the dangerous reality that our reproductive freedoms are under siege. It will also demonstrate the devastating impact of these extreme policies for women and families across the nation. But the people of Florida loudly and overwhelmingly fought back by following our law to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot for voters that would limit government interference with this deeply personal choice of abortion. So now it is imperative that we finish the job and raise our voices higher collectively and share more of our stories to ensure our reproductive freedom is preserved in our state. And women across the South are counting on us as well. Hopefully, we'll see similar ballot measures emerge as it becomes clear that the vast majority of Americans, both right and left, support reproductive freedom. And today we'll shine a light on the advocates, medical professionals, and everyday people who suffer because of the dangerous, extreme policies that limit our freedom. The consequences of Dobbs are far-reaching. It placed women's lives and health at risk, and it created a climate of fear among healthcare providers, which reduces access to all forms of reproductive care. Sadly, we could fill an arena with people who have stories like what we will hear today. But unfortunately, Mr. Leader, because of a culture of retribution and bullying by our governor and the executive branch, there are a lot of potential witnesses who are afraid to step forward and share their stories today. And our freedom is the first casualty. Extreme post-Dobbs policies force women to travel to other states, lose time at work, or put their own health at risk. Doctors are forced to move to another state or discontinue services, as so many of them live in perpetual fear of criminalization and persecution and prosecution. In Florida and nationwide, extremists will continue to weaponize every legislative tool they can to control other people's lives, health, and bodies. Anti-abortion extremism erodes women's progress, ignores science, and tramples our constitutional rights. Therefore, it is my hope that today's hearing will paint a true picture of what is happening across America when we deny women's freedoms and bodily autonomy. It will tell us just what's at stake in this fight, and it will explain why Democrats and President Biden refuse to back down from any fight for our reproductive freedoms. It's rather simple. Patients, not politicians, should have the freedom to make their own healthcare decisions, full stop.